What is good, everybody? Nathan Lombardi here with Lambo Media, and across the screen from me is MLB alum Christian Bergman. Here in this episode of the Walk It Off podcast. Here in this week's episode, it's only our second ever episode talking about just strictly baseball, and Christian and I just solely talking about baseball only with no guests in particular. But in this segment, I want to talk about the MLB playoffs in particular, and the Tampa Bay Rays to start it off. Wow, are they blowing people out of the waters? And I wouldn't even say that, but they sure are surprising a lot of people, even me. I'm not sure about you, Christian. Obviously they weren't projected to do this good headed into the 2020 season, and even the MLB playoffs. They were projected to do relatively solid because of their pitching, their fielding, and their offensive production as well. But I don't know that I necessarily saw them supposed to perform at this level. But without further ado, let's kick it off by talking about the Rays versus the Yankees in Game 5 in particular. Christian, we watch baseball. Obviously, you've experienced the player's perspective in the past. Obviously, you're retired now. What were your initial thoughts after seeing that Mike Brosseau home run to put the Rays up in the 8th inning against the phenomenal closer Aroldis Chapman? And by no means, we'll get into this a little bit later, by no means was that the pitcher's fault for the Yankees in that Game 5 for the Yankees. But what were your initial thoughts after seeing that Game 5 of the Yankees versus the Rays?
Yeah, the first thing I thought of was that it's just very baseball what happened. You got a powerhouse like the Yankees. You're kind of the underdog team with the Rays.
Exactly.
And we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Like, you stack them up next to each other, and obviously the Yankees have a much more, powerful looking lineup and pitching staff and relievers
right.
But it's not like football really where you can put two teams next to each other on paper and 99% of the time the bigger, faster, better team wins. That's just not how baseball is. So the Yankees, you could argue, have a more talented team, but it doesn't matter because the Rays got to Game 5. They put themselves in a position, both with Glasnow starting, they're scoring just enough runs to stay in it. And next thing Rousseau comes up with a big hit against one of the best relievers in baseball.
Right.
And that's all it takes. And it's, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a few weeks ago too, where Chapman threw at him. And so, Rousseau like really gets the last laugh. But it's just a very, baseball thing to happen. So, after watching it for so long, in a way, like, I'm not even surprised by things like that anymore. It almost makes more sense when the less likely thing happens. It may sound stupid, but, it's very baseball. So I was glad to see him move on, though.
Yeah, and we've talked about, that in particular in the past here on the Walk It Off podcast about, how that is baseball-like and how here in the 2020 season, it's really anyone's game. We've hit on that point all throughout this 2020 season, and even before that, we talked about how this 2020 season is going to be anyone's game, and the Rays are proving our point right here in the 2020 playoffs and in the 2020 MLB season in particular. But although they did, this was very baseball-like, and, like you mentioned, football is a lot different as far as, capability goes and projections go for winning. I thought the Yankees had, Game 5 in the bag with Glasnow coming off of only 2 days rest. Obviously, Garrett Cole was coming off of short rest as well, but he got $324 million for 9 years for a reason. They got him for this game in particular. They obviously couldn't plan this game out and plan this 2020 MLB playoff, format out. But this is what they got him for. And by no means, like I mentioned a bit earlier, by no means is this, the pitcher's fault for the Yankees here in this Game 5 versus the Rays. Garrett Cole pitched, I believe it was 5 1/3, giving up only one run off of a few hits and maybe a few errors. I'm not too sure about that side.
I think it was only one hit. I think it was a home run.
Yeah, exactly. And same with the Aroldis.
Yeah. It was like
same with the Aroldis.
Two mistake pitches, or you can barely even call them mistakes. It was a Judge went up to rob that home run, and he got caught in the top of the fence there because he didn't realize there was an overhang. But it's like two pitches, two good pieces of hitting. There's the game, So it's hard, like you said, it's hard to plan that out. But they both, I'd say, pitched really well, and all you need to do is score one more run than the other team.
Right, and same with the Aroldis Chapman. He's used to rather coming in relatively late in the game. He obviously came in during the eighth inning. He's used to coming in maybe in the ninth usually, but that was an expected appearance for Aroldis Chapman. He was expecting to play in that game. He only gave up one hit in that appearance, which was the home run by Mike Brosseau, which was a clutch hit. Like you said, Mike Brosseau got the last laugh. But without further ado. And another thing about the Raves, they are now up 2-0 against the Astros. I was trying to think of who they're playing, but I got it now. They're now up 2-0 against the Astros after beating them earlier today here on Monday. So they're definitely a team to watch out for, even possibly in the World Series. They're looking pretty good right now, now having a 2-0 series lead against the Houston Astros. But without further ado, let's transition into the NL side of things and talking about the Braves and Dodgers series. But before we get into that, we've been talking about how, the MLB playoffs and the 2020 MLB season in particular has been very baseball-like, and, the projections, those don't matter during this 2020 season because it's shortened and it's anyone's game, like we mentioned a bit earlier in the episodes a bit previously in the weeks past. Like we mentioned, it's anyone's games, but the Braves are just putting all of their pieces together. It's their offensive production, it's their defense, it's their pitching, it's everything. And to hit on the pitching side of things for the Atlanta Braves, let's talk a little bit about Tylermatic. He is really balling out here in this 2020 MLB season for the Atlanta Braves on a huge comeback. Obviously, he wasn't really seeing much MLB time previously before this MLB season besides with the Rockies. So let's talk a little bit about Tylermatic here in this 2020 season. He has pitched for a 2.79 ERA. And Christian, you mentioned before we started recording that you saw, an article published recently. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, article came out today just talking about his journey, and obviously, being good friends with him, I've watched his journey and just seen all the things that he's had to overcome. And I thought it was kind of cool how in the article, I didn't realize this, but the Texas Air Hogs, which was the team he was playing with, I believe it was last year and a little bit the year before, independent ball team. They actually play out of a ballpark that's about 8 miles or so from ballpark in Arlington, which is where he's at right now, playing with the Braves. So, and coming off, or the numbers he's put up so far this season, it's just crazy to see how far he's come in terms of career journey. And then geographically, the article talks about you can practically see the Texas Air Hogs Stadium from, they may be exaggerating a little bit, but
yeah,
you can practically see it from
right.
ballpark at Arlington. So, I've been watching, every game that he pitches, and man, he is just dialed in, just pumping 98, 99, just blowing people away. So really cool to see. And, I'm definitely rooting for the Braves to get past the Dodgers, and I hope they do. But I think it'll be a good series. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you mentioned, how you're rooting for the Braves to, get past the Dodgers here in this National League Championship Series. Let's talk a little bit about predictions now that we wrapped up talking about, the Braves' production in the past here in the 2020 postseason. All of that is just pushed aside now, and it's all about now. So what are your predictions for this National League Championship Series of the Braves versus the Los Angeles Dodgers?
We've got a little information here. So Rays are up 2-0.
Yep.
I don't think the Astros have they're not packing the punch this year to overcome that. So I'm going to go Rays. And I always hated playing the Dodgers when I was with the Rockies. So I'm just hoping they lose. And obviously I want to see Tyler in the World Series. So
right.
I'm rooting for the Braves to get there. And I got the Braves in 6.
Okay.
That's my prediction.
Okay.
In the World Series, I got the Braves winning the whole thing in 6.
I like it. Just a little underdog prediction. And on the AL side of things, it's the same thing for me. I have the Rays beating the Astros on the AL side of things. Obviously, we already know that they're up 2-0 after, just winning today. But Maybe that would have looked a little bit differently if we predicted this before, the series started. But now that we know that they're up 2-0 here in this series, I have the Rays winning this series. And for the NL side of things, I have the opposite side of you. I hope that the Braves win here in this championship series on the NL side of things against the Los Angeles Dodgers, but I don't see it happening. And I have the Dodgers in 6 against the Braves. But that wraps up everything for this week's episode of the Walk It Off podcast. For this Monday's episode, at least, we will have episodes as well on Wednesday and Friday of this week. We will have Mitch Bratt joining us a little bit later. He's from Canada. He's an FSU commit, so we'll get into that guest appearance a little later on in this week's episode, either Wednesday or Friday. So stay tuned for that. But Christian, do you have anything else to add for this week's episode?
That's all I got. Go Braves.
Yeah, and Rays. I'm not too fond of the Houston Astros after finding out what they did in the past. So let's go Rays and let's go Braves.
Right.
But without further ado, that wraps up everything for this week's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and drop your questions for the future episodes as well to possibly be featured.